You brought this on yourself, Dad. You're 68. What do you even need this much money for anyway?
My son, David, stared at me across the sleek mahogany dining table of his high-end suburban home. His voice was entirely devoid of guilt. He didn't look like a thief. He looked like a businessman closing a routine deal. I sat frozen in my chair, my fingers clenched around a cold ceramic coffee mug. Just 20 minutes earlier, I had logged into my online banking app to pay my monthly insurance premium. The screen loaded slowly. When the primary balance finally appeared, my breath caught in my throat. Account balance, $142.15. I refreshed the page twice. I logged out and logged back in. 35 years of hard labor at the printing press, my entire life savings of $412,000 had vanished. The transaction history showed a single, massive wire transfer initiated at 8 a.m. that morning. It went directly into a corporate account called Vanguard Tech Ventures. David was the sole owner of Vanguard Tech Ventures. If you want to hear more raw, honest confessions from people who have survived life's hardest trials, take just 5 seconds to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us tell these untold stories. David, I managed to say, my voice cracking under the weight of the shock. That was my retirement. The money from selling the family home. The money your mother and I promised would protect us. And it's going to protect your future grandchildren, David shot back, standing up and smoothing his tailored jacket. My tech startup is on the verge of bankruptcy, Dad. If I didn't inject capital today, the banks would have seized this house by Friday. I used your joint account authorization. It's completely legal.
Legal? I whispered. My eyes drifted to a framed family photograph on his mantelpiece. It showed David as a teenager, smiling broadly beside my late wife, Martha. You stole from me while I was sleeping, David. You took the only security I had left. You have Social Security, David said coldly, checking his gold watch. You'll survive. Besides, I'm your only son. That money would have been my inheritance eventually anyway. I'm just taking it a bit early. He grabbed his car keys from the counter and walked toward the front door. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't apologize. He just left me sitting alone in his pristine kitchen, staring at a bank balance that wouldn't cover my rent for next month. I stood up, my old knees popping in the silence. I walked out to my beat-up sedan, my mind spinning into darkness. But as I pulled out of his driveway, a notification chimed through my car's speakers. It was an automated alert from a completely different financial institution. The email alert was from Pacific Coast Trust. It was an institution I hadn't interacted with in over 3 years. Alert: inactive account review required. Please contact your account representative immediately. I pulled my car over into an empty parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. 3 years ago, right before my wife Martha passed away from her long battle with illness, she had handed me a small, faded blue velvet pouch. Inside was a single brass safe deposit key and a crumpled piece of paper with a handwritten account number. Don't look at it unless you have absolutely no other choice, Richard, she had whispered from her hospital bed, her hand weak and cold in mine. Promise me, David can never know this exists. At the time, I assumed it was just a small rainy day fund, perhaps a few $1,000s she had scraped together from her sewing business. I had been too consumed by grief to investigate. I had locked the key and the paper inside an old metal lockbox in my closet and completely forgotten about it. I drove straight back to my small rented apartment. My hands shook so violently that it took me 3 attempts to fit the key into the lockbox. I pulled out the crumpled paper and the brass key. My phone buzzed on the bed. It was a text message from David's wife. Absolute panic bleeding through the text. Richard, please tell me you didn't do something crazy. The police just showed up at David's office. They have a warrant. I stared at the screen, completely bewildered.
I hadn't called the police. I hadn't even filed a report yet. I was still trying to process the fact that my own flesh and blood had wiped out my bank account. If the police weren't there because of my stolen retirement fund, why were they raiding my son's office? I dialed David's number immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I called his wife, Chloe, but she didn't answer either. The mystery was growing deeper by the second, and the weight in my chest was turning into absolute terror. I grabbed the brass key and the account number, walked out to my car, and drove directly to the downtown branch of Pacific Coast Trust. The bank was a historic brick building with heavy marble pillars. I walked up to the private client desk and presented the crumpled paper and my ID to a middle-aged woman named Evelyn. She looked at the account number, and her polite smile instantly froze. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dropping to a respectful whisper, "please follow me into the private office." She led me down a carpeted hallway into a room with wood-paneled walls. A few minutes later, the branch manager walked in holding a thick ledger and a black plastic case. "Mr. Vance, we've been trying to reach you for over a year," the manager said, extending his hand. "Your late wife, Martha Vance, established a blind corporate trust under her maiden name back in 2018. According to the bylaws she established, the trust was set to remain completely private unless your primary accounts dropped below a specific threshold." "A threshold?" I asked, my head spinning. "What threshold?" $500, the manager explained, opening the folder. "Our system automatically detected the massive wire transfer out of your joint account this morning. The trust is now fully unlocked and transferred entirely into your name." He pushed a paper statement across the desk toward me. I picked it up, my eyes straining to read the figures. I expected to see $5,000, maybe $10,000.
The number at the bottom of the page read $1,850,000. I couldn't breathe. This is a mistake," I stammered. "My wife was a school teacher. She didn't have this kind of money. Where did this come from?" The manager took a deep breath. "The funds originated from a patent sale in 2017, a software designed for logistics management. It was registered under her maiden name, Martha Jenkins. But there's something else you need to see, Mr. Vance. Your wife left a specific instruction letter inside the safe deposit box. It was to be delivered to you only on the day the trust unlocked." He handed me the brass box. My fingers trembled as I turned the key. Inside lay a single handwritten letter wrapped around an old, cracked USB flash drive. I opened the letter. Martha's beautiful, elegant handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Richard, if you are reading this, it means our son David has finally done what I always feared he would do. It means he has taken everything from you. I never told you the truth about my patent because I was trying to save our son's soul. But he made a choice 5 years ago that broke my heart. Look at the files on the drive, Richard. Then you must decide whether to protect him or finally save yourself." I sat in the bank's private viewing room, the loaner laptop the manager had provided. My eyes burned as folder after folder loaded onto the screen. They weren't just business documents, they were legal correspondence, bank transcripts, and medical records from 2021, the year Martha's health had collapsed. As I clicked through the files, a horrific realization began to take shape. Martha hadn't died from a sudden, unpreventable escalation of her illness. The specialist who could have saved her, a renowned oncologist in Boston, had required a $200,000 cash deposit to begin an experimental gene therapy treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. Martha had given that exact amount to David, pulling it from her secret patent funds, instructing him to wire it directly to the Boston clinic. But the wire transfer had never arrived. Instead, I found a receipt showing that on the exact same week Martha was denied entry into the clinical trial, David had purchased his first luxury commercial property for Vanguard Tech Ventures. He had used his own mother's life-saving medical fund to launch his startup.
He had lied to me, telling me the Boston clinic had simply run out of space for new patients. Martha had discovered the truth just weeks before she passed away. She had secretly altered her will and her trust, keeping the remaining $1.8 million completely hidden from both of us, knowing that David's greed would eventually drive him to target me. "He let her die," I whispered into the empty room. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Tears poured down my face, dripping onto the cold plastic of the laptop keyboard. My son let his own mother die for a real estate investment. My cell phone rang, shattering the silence of the room. It was David. I answered it, my voice dead and cold. "David?" "Dad, thank God you picked up," he gasped. He sounded frantic, his voice echoing as if he were running through a large space. "You need to come down to the local precinct right now. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit just raided my house and my office. They think Vanguard Tech is running a money laundering scheme. They've frozen all my corporate accounts, including the $412,000 I transferred from you this morning." "Why would they think you're laundering money, David?" I asked, my heart turning to ice. "It's a misunderstanding," he screamed. "A former business partner framed me. Dad, listen to me. The feds said if I can prove the $412,000 was a legitimate, voluntary personal loan from a family member, they will release that specific account. You need to sign a backdated loan agreement right now. If you don't, I'm going to federal prison." I stared at the laptop screen, at the medical records and the stolen wire transfer receipts from 5 years ago. "A loan, David?" I asked softly. "Yesterday you told me it was your inheritance. You told me I didn't need the money anyway." "I was stressed, Dad. I didn't mean it like that," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please, you're my father. Family stands by each other, no matter what. You can't let them ruin my life over a paperwork error." Family stands by each other. The words felt like a sick joke running through my mind. He had abandoned his mother to die in a hospital bed while he bought shiny office spaces. He had left me with $142 in my bank account without a single shred of remorse. "Where are you now, David?" I asked. "I'm at the lawyer's office on 4th Street, Arthur Pendleton's office. He has the paperwork ready for you to sign. Please hurry, Dad. The federal agents are giving us until 4 p.m. to present the source of funds." I looked at the watch on my wrist. It was 2:30 p.m. "I'll be there," I said, and hung up the phone. I turned to the bank manager, who was waiting patiently by the door. "Can you print out every single one of these financial records, including the original wire transfers from 2021 and the corporate structure of my wife's trust?" "Of course, Mr. Vance," the manager said, his face grim. "It will take about 10 minutes." While he printed the documents, I called a man I hadn't spoken to in years, an old friend from my high school days who had gone on to become a senior investigator for the State Regulatory Board. His name was Thomas Miller. "Richard?" Tom said, sounding surprised to hear from me. "It's been ages. Is everything okay?" "I need a favor, Tom," I said, my voice completely steady now. The grief had burned away, leaving nothing but a hard, unbreakable clarity. "I have a set of certified financial documents that your department has been looking for regarding Vanguard Tech Ventures, and I know exactly where the owner is going to be in 1 hour." The office of Arthur Pendleton, attorney at law, was thick with the scent of old paper and expensive leather. When I walked in at 3:45 p.m., David jumped up from his leather chair. His face was pale, dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes. "Dad, thank God," he said, rushing forward with a clipboard in his hand. "Here, it's a standard intra-family loan agreement. It states you willingly transferred the $412,000 to my corporate account as a business investment 2 weeks ago. Just sign at the bottom." The lawyer, an older man with sharp, unsympathetic eyes, sat behind his desk, watching me closely. I didn't take the pen. Instead, I pulled the thick envelope of printed documents from the bank out of my coat pocket and dropped it onto the desk.
"What's this?" David asked, frowning. He reached out and pulled the top document from the envelope. It was the 2021 receipt from the Boston Medical Clinic, stamped with a giant red "Canceled due to non-payment" notification. David's breath hitched. He tried to quickly shove the paper back into the envelope, but his hands were shaking so badly he dropped it on the floor. "Dad, I can explain that," he whispered, looking terrified for the first time in his life. "The business was failing back then, too. I was going to pay it back. I thought the local doctors had everything under control." "She knew, David," I interrupted, my voice dropping to a low, powerful register. "Your mother found out what you did before she died. She knew you stole her chance at life to buy a commercial building." "Richard," the lawyer interrupted smoothly, standing up, "whatever personal family issues you have, they are separate from the legal matter at hand. If you do not sign this loan agreement, your son faces immediate federal indictment for bank fraud and illegal restructuring." "I know," I said, turning to look directly at the lawyer, "and I have no intention of signing it." David gasped, his eyes widening in pure horror. "Dad, you can't do this to me. I'm your son. If I go to prison, I lose everything: my house, my company, my reputation." "You lost your family 5 years ago, David," I said, my heart completely detached from his panic. "You just didn't realize it until today, because I was still acting as your safety net. Well, the safety net is gone." Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors of the office swung open. 2 federal agents in dark suits stepped into the room, followed closely by my old friend, Tom Miller.
"David Vance," the lead agent said, pulling a gold badge from his pocket. "You are under arrest for financial fraud, money laundering, and the illegal conversion of elder funds. Please put your hands behind your back." David screamed at me as they pulled him out of the office in handcuffs. He called me a monster. He told me he hated me, that he would never speak to me again, that I had destroyed our family. I didn't yell back. I just stood by the window, watching the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers reflect against the glass of the high-rise buildings. The consequences were swift and total. David's business partners turned on him within 48 hours, providing state prosecutors with evidence of systemic embezzlement dating back nearly a decade. His luxury home was foreclosed upon by the bank to satisfy his corporate debts, and his wife, Chloe, moved back to her parents' home in Ohio, completely cutting ties with him. Because I refused to sign the backdated loan agreement, the federal courts ruled that the $412,000 David had taken from my account was a fraudulent transfer. 3 weeks later, the funds were fully restored to my primary bank account. I didn't keep the money. I didn't keep Martha's $1.8 million trust fund either. I used a portion of it to establish the Martha Jenkins Vance Memorial Foundation at the Boston Oncology Clinic, a permanent endowment that pays for the experimental treatments of low-income patients who cannot afford the steep cash deposits. The rest of the wealth was placed into a secure, locked trust for David's young children, completely insulated from any corporate interference, managed by an independent legal firm. I kept only what I originally had, my humble printing press retirement. It was more than enough for a simple life. Today, I live in a quiet cottage near the coast, far away from the stressful corporate suburbs. I spend my mornings walking along the shore, listening to the crashing waves, and my afternoons tending to a small vegetable garden in my backyard. I never went to visit David in the federal detention center, and I don't plan to. Some people believe that forgiveness means forgetting the past and accepting abuse. I don't believe that anymore. I forgive him for my own peace of mind, but I will never let him near my life again. Sometimes, when the evenings are quiet, I sit in my armchair and look at the small brass keychain Martha left behind. I still miss her every single day. But as I look out the window at the setting sun, I don't feel the crushing weight of loneliness or betrayal anymore. I feel a deep, unshakable calm. My son thought he had left me broken and empty-handed. He had no idea that my wife's final act of love had given me the power to finally set myself free.